could step back, then take a look at me, then maybe I could see where my destiny is taking me. 'Cause I don't think I can make it through another day, Lord. See, the pressure has got too much, got a pain that just won't go away.
Well, good morning, everyone. I have so many people to thank before I start handing out some pretty severe kind of language, if you like. So many people to thank for helping to get the Southby project into a venue that lies in the very heart of the city of Bristol. It's my intention and the intention of those who support the charity to use this event today as a way into the very hearts of those people who can bring about the much needed positive change we're listening to and heeding the voice of survivors is concerned. My sincere thanks go to the Southby project trustees, all staff and all the volunteers who not only just put up with me as their boss, but are working so hard to get this event to work today. Special thanks go to the sponsors of this event. We can't do these things without these sponsors, by the way. And they include the Colstonhall authorities and excellent staff who have helped enormously in so many ways. The Nisbet family for their offer of immediate financial support. The splendid What's Right charity team and Lansdowne Place, who helped meet the financial shortfall along with Mr. Roger Riggs. The goodie bags come courtesy of Memorandum. And as with all those who help this charity in so many ways, do please support them where you can. Really special thanks must go to Suzanne, who's done a tremendous job in coordinating this event and getting us through these doors today. And not to forget you, the audience. You've come along here. That means so much, certainly to me. I'm aware some of you have travelled very far to get here today, and that there are those with us who may well be battling the nerves, anxiety, and the many phobias and demons that often come along with recovery and survival of abuse. But you are here, which makes a great statement and typifies your determination. I thank you and acknowledge the effort it took to make this journey and respect your commitment and your courage. Thanks goes to those who supervised and attended that crazy Zumbathon. I don't know, I mean, it's a strange way to start a conference or an event, isn't it? You know, but it sounded lively, but I didn't have the time to go and join it. Sad to say. So, and thanks to those who worked so hard on developing their workshops and who will facilitate them later today, so do try to attend. Our patron, Jeff Gollop, and Director of Neighbourhood Services, Alison Comley here, were both so busy with their work at the City Hall. Special mention and thanks go to the members of the debate panel, Kerry McCarthy MP and Charlotte Leslie MP, with timetables and schedules that are horrendous enough without me on their case, really. They will be joining Marvin Rees, Ellen Devine, Ian and myself at that debate later. Not one of the debate panel shirked. Not one of them suggested they had other things to do. Not one of them threw in the towel and withdrew. Whatever the nettle of debating abuse may have looked like, and given the enormous amount of publicity about abuse of late, that nettle has a very sharp sting. They are willing to grasp it. Their example of being prepared to be open and to put their heads above the parapet is a fine example to others. So to one and all, I thank you on behalf of all those connected with the Southby project and survivors everywhere. So my fears were unfounded. I was scared, I'll tell you. Lots of people turned up, but I was thinking weeks ahead, are they going to be there? Are they going to listen to that voice? But you're here, and you're attending an event that is the very first of its kind in this city. And you're here to help us celebrate the work of the Southby project, here to celebrate too the courage, tenacity, determination, and sheer stickability of survivors of child abuse. I sincerely hope that this event represents but another stepping stone to ensuring the voice of survivors everywhere is truly heard, and not only heard, but fully acknowledged. I have no doubt most, or if not all of you, would have been made aware of the enormous press and media coverage of appalling levels of child abuse, of tales of horror, of pain, suffering, the loss of dignity, the shame, the guilt, and loss of self-respect that is the very lot of survivors. And respect is what I will focus on today. Respect, a quite beautiful word and simple word made up of just 7 letters. Yet it's what lay behind those words that can mean so much. To the person shown respect, and to the person who is being given that respect. And I will say immediately that survivors most surely deserve and need to be shown far more respect than they are at this time. Especially when as children, they were shown the ultimate in disrespect, when their innocence in childhood was most brutally cast aside, the impact of which many of us know so well. And most certainly, the impact of child abuse and subsequent trauma can, will, and does correlate into later self-harming. Drug, alcohol misuse, self-injury, isolation, development of coping strategies that are ultimately so harmful. There are huge financial implications, and the cost in human terms, we can't work those out. The impact that takes the levels of dysfunction for our childhood into adulthood, as depicted in the cycle of harm, which is illustrated in the charity annual reports you've got in your goodie bags. The cycle of harm signifies and personifies very much of what this charity is all about. So then, with so much evidence, quantitative and qualitative information available, does not these appalling acts of abuse demand a far more serious response than we have at present? What by way of fit and proper support is there in existence for those many, many thousands of people who have been stripped of their dignity, leaving them in that cocoon of desolation, anxious, scared out of their wits? And much as there is a need for immediacy immediately following child abuse, which if we look at the appalling amount of stories of horror circulating around this country, would suggest there is nowhere near enough appropriate care and concern. I would argue there is nowhere near enough appropriate care or concern for adult survivors of abuse either. So now we've got the scenario that is typical across our country, a double whammy. You are damned if you are abused as a child, and you are damned as a survivor. Prior to the hemorrhaging of stories splashed all over the red tops, the Southmead Project has for 20 years been trying to pick up the pieces of people's lives that have been shattered by abuse and trauma. We've never had to advertise our services, yet we have always had a waiting list of people, and people not just from areas of deprivation, I might say, but people from across all spectrums of society and all parts of the city and beyond, of course. There is huge demand on the service, huge demands on staff so committed it fills me with pride, and it does make me want to weep. There is and always has been a huge demand for help. The results of our work with survivors are exceptional. The team at this charity is exceptional. The survivors who come through our doors seeking help with their plight are exceptional. The agony of abuse, the lottery of survival, and the battle for recovery is exceptional. The whole situation is frankly exceptional and surely demands exceptional intervention. And talking therapies need to be prescribed, not tranquilizers. We need to look far more closely at reasons behind all forms of mental illness: depression, self-injury, food disorders, the drug addict, the alcoholic who staggers through the door, as these types of coping mechanisms can so often accompany experience of abuse and trauma. We need to think very carefully indeed before we stick any labels on the foreheads of those who have faced abuse in childhood and who have battled with trauma ever since. The impact of abuse and its correlation with self-harming per se needs surely to be more greatly acknowledged, with appropriate action being taken to address the need. And like I've already said, there are enormous cost implications, and if we continue to ignore this huge problem, the cost in financial terms and human terms will begin to grow. Without question, the work that is carried out at the Southmead Project with survivors who bring a multitude of complex needs demands top quality staff delivering those top quality interventions. Without question then, service provision for survivors, wherever they may be, demand that it be wholly appropriate, robust, consistent, safe, and confidential. In short, it needs to be long-term with substantial funding. Yet I cannot say one way or another whether or not the Southmead project will still have its doors open for business 1 year ahead, our 21st birthday. Such is a challenge we are facing, and I've got no doubt other agencies who do similar types of work too. Our biggest supporter in financial terms to date is Big Lottery, which has done a tremendous job in seeing this charity through the early years of its birth and periodically thereafter, including the last 3 years. We shall be applying for continuation funding from this source within the next few months. The chances of us getting what we need are open to the vagaries of the Big Lottery adjudication panel. They are likely to be under enormous pressure when considering the many thousands of applications for funding they received. This team, adjudicating team, will be faced with making a choice. In every sense, the chance of us getting this funding is very much a lottery in itself. But I say, trying to help those who have faced the pain, the suffering, the shame, the guilt, the isolation, the anxiety, the stress, and the deepest of depressions, the sheer panic that is child abuse, should not and must not continue to be a lottery. If ever there were the need to ensure work of this type was not subject to that fickle finger of fate, the throw of the dice is working with survivors of child abuse and trauma. This is not a lottery. This is far, far too big, too demanding, wholly unequal, and totally unjust. Frankly, it is shamefully disrespectful. As Richard Sennett so eloquently puts it, lack of respect, though less aggressive than an outright insult, can take an equally wounding form. No insult is offered another person, but neither is recognition extended. He or she is not seen as a full human being whose presence matters. Why then should it be in such short supply? And in echoing those words, I would add, why oh why then are child victims and adult survivors of child abuse being cast aside and rejected? Rejection reminds me just how difficult the challenges are facing those agencies like the Southmead Project and those who are trying to grasp that nettle and pick up the baton of positive change. And I'd like to share a part of my story, of my life. During pregnancy and with me in the supposed safety of her womb, my mother had been brutally attacked by my father. Both of us were very fortunate and very lucky to survive the birth. I was placed with an aunt for safety, but the attacks on my mother were to continue. I rejoined my family, and during my early years I witnessed further attacks, the awfulness of domestic abuse. I remember at about 5 years of age how I worried and fretted, pondered and cried and struggled to find ways to stop them fighting. Building up my courage, I finally thought, right, I know what I'd do. I'll go next door and I'll bang on the door and ask for help. Another argument started, and I did run next door and ask for help. And it was opened by a huge, huge guy there. And I pleaded with him to come and help stop this fight which was going on. He looked at me and shook his head and said, I won't interfere. To this day, I was devastated, obviously, at that time. There was a 5-year-old kid banging on the door asking for help and being rejected. And to this day, right now, this very minute, I can feel here that sense of abandonment, of rejection. And abuse for me did not end there, but that's another story. What remains is the memory of that rejection and the knowledge that rejection of survivors everywhere remains a constant and remains appallingly disrespectful. So then, how do we as a charity manage to keep our heads above water, to tread that water long enough for the lifeboat, that is a successful funding bid, to come along and drag us out and save us from drowning and oblivion? The answer is to have an exceptional team at the charity, with every one of them working their butts off, filling in funding applications, attending meeting after meeting to state our case, trying desperately to help keep the charity afloat, all the time knowing that just 2% of the total funding bids we send out each year would get a positive reply. Whilst we are most grateful to those who ensured the charity would get some money this year from the Police Crime Commissioner's pot, and we are trying to earn our keep via the excellent Oasis Talk partnership, this charity is not and never has been in receipt of long-term funding from a statutory source for our work with survivors. In effect, very much like the survivors we try to help, whilst no insult is offered, we are not being seen. Recognition by way of actual finance with which to do our work is not being extended. However, we are resourceful, eternally hopeful, and constantly explore many ways of getting sufficient income to survive. This year, for example, I took part in the Bristol 10K. You might not think it, but I did. And a 10K run along with 24 other far, far faster individuals, I might say, to raise funds, but not knowing how much would be raised, but we had hope. Along with others, I also took part in the Bristol bike ride, and on the 3rd of September, my 69th birthday, Trevor Arnott, one of our trustees, and I climbed the rigging on the SS Great Britain in order to try and raise funds. You'll see it later on when they play the film over. So it's pretty funny. But it wasn't at the time, I can tell you. Joining us on the ship to offer vocal support was a dubious-looking character. You'll see it's so crazy, this costume he's got. He's called Huaria from the What's Right team, who have helped us in financial and in-kind ways for so many years. Their photographer, Elliot, and John, another colleague from Southmead, I'm really proud to have along with us today, who's filming us here, and he's just filming speeches. If he films other parts, we'll make sure that we ask permission, for you to be included in that. So none of us knew how much we raised, but we had hope. Hope. That's a lovely word too. Prior to this particular climb, Ian McFadden, this is Ian here, our keynote speaker, had a much more difficult task in conquering Scafell, and in the process raising many, many thousands of pounds for this charity. I hadn't even met the bloke, and he's doing them kind of things. I didn't, and then what happened after that? Ian has actually paid Southmead Project to come all the way from Scotland to talk here today. And I think that's absolutely fabulous, and I thank you so much, Ian. But Ian had hope. I reckon he got loads of hope. And hope, it appears to many people like ourselves who are trying to change this thing, it springs eternal. But all well and good, we might say. All good fun pulling together to raise funds for charity and to dress up in outrageous costumes in order to help further the work of the Southmead Project, to raise funds to help those who self-harm by cutting themselves as a direct consequence of that trauma, who misuse alcohol or drugs in order to suppress the most awful of thoughts, to depress the nightmare of existence, and who so sadly might take their lives as a direct consequence of that trauma. And what I'm describing here today, now, is the harsh reality of what abuse and trauma is all about. This is actually now what we're doing. We're taking the gloves off. We're going to reveal the cold hand of fate, the stacked deck that has been dealt, a stacked deck that children have to pick up and will accompany them for the rest of their lives unless their voice is finally heard. Why must their young life remain one of pain and suffering through into adulthood and on to their ultimate demise at times? Why has the quality of their young life and that of survivors become a lottery? This is not a lottery. Can we not hear that voice? This should not be a lottery. Can we not listen to their pain, and can we not acknowledge that their presence really matters? Can we not respect them? Respect, I come back again to that one word containing but 7 letters, but meaning so much. Polar opposite of respect, of course, is disrespect and rejection hurts. I can tell you it hurts so much. I know that from a kid when I was that big, even before that. But I have hope. Southmead Project has hope. Survivors have hope. It's the only thing sometimes we got. My guess is all of you here today have some form of hope somewhere. And rather like the little kid who ran next door for help, I'm asking those of you who are here today and who have the capacity to help me and this charity to build upon what was started 20 years ago, to put aside personal, professional, organizational, and political agendas, to encourage statutory and voluntary organizations alike to align themselves with others, to unite and to bring about the much needed change. This task is far too big, far too difficult to take on in isolation. Let's put aside that archaic detritus that clutters the freedom of our thoughts, of action, and embrace instead little children like me who have to knock on so many doors for help with their plight. Let us truly hear the voice of all those who are at risk and the voices of survivors in their fight for life. And let's dismantle any sense of making this business a lottery. For where life has become a lottery, it has become a life with only ever one winner, and that's going to be the perpetrators. And the alternatives? To pick up the pieces, to spend countless millions and millions of pounds every year to cosmetically cover up the many cracks that there are many cracks of human oblivion and decay. Let's remind ourselves that children in abusive environments who are at risk have no choice, no defense, no way of escaping the horror of abuse. Let us consider the life of survivors and for him or her, the lottery that their life has become. And I ask you, should this really be so, what I'm talking about here? Finally, I will speak directly to you survivors who've come along and made this journey today. During my own recovery from sexual, physical, and emotional abuse and the addiction to drugs that followed, I searched and searched for ways in which I might find a release from my pain and suffering. And one day, I don't know how it happened, I came across a most beautiful saying which gave me such hope. And I use it regularly because I still got to fight my demons. I still got to fight them almost daily. But I've got hope. And I know I've got a very strong person within myself able to do that. And survivors are like that. We've got tremendous courage and strength. We have it in bucket loads. But sometimes we need someone to help us find that. This saying goes like this, and it comes from the Norwegian fighters in the Second World War. When all seems lost and where it seems we've nothing left, we go on and on and on until we cannot go any further. And then we go twice as far. And our goal, the most wonderful goal, freedom, emancipation. Go well, people. Thanks. Ladies and gents, Ian McFadden.
Hi folks, and how do I follow that? Firstly, I'd like to thank Mike for inviting me down here, and I'd like to thank you all for coming down today. I know that there are a lot of people who've travelled from loads of different parts of the country to be here, who I speak to frequently on Twitter. Hopefully I'll get an opportunity to meet and speak with you. I really want to thank you for your support that you give me and you give others on social media, because I think that's really, it's been quite an interesting journey. I am going to talk about some really sensitive subjects, and I know that there are people here who have suffered similar experiences to myself, and I don't want to upset you. But if you are triggered, if you are upset, please feel free. Find an exit, head out. I know that there's counsellors out there to help you. My last of my intentions is to upset or hurt anybody. But there will be people here today who will not understand about the trauma of childhood sexual abuse. And I think it's important that they understand what that involves. I came from a very privileged background. I'm going to get up and walk, folks. I'm sorry, I can't sit down if that's okay. I came from a really privileged background. I had two loving parents and a loving older sister. and I had all the opportunities in life that were given to me that so many people aren't offered. My parents had come from really quite humble beginnings. My dad was 5 in a bed, single parent, really successful at business, and so was my mum. And what they did was they pulled themselves up and really were really successful in their careers. My connection with Bristol was that my dad, at 21, was the youngest general manager of a 5-star hotel, and that was the Grand in Bristol, way before I was born. So my parents ran hotels, beautiful luxury hotels, and worked abroad. And because they did that, they wanted to offer myself and my sister the opportunities that their parents weren't able to give them. And they thought those opportunities were to send me to private education. Hence the accent. It's the only thing that came out from my education that I think has any value, and that has no value. I was sent away to a boarding school at the age of 6 to prepare me for my prep school. So I started boarding at school when I was 6 years old, and I had a lovely, lovely time for a year, very nurtured, very loved. I then moved on to this school called Caldecott at the age of 7.5, and my first year there was actually okay. I was this happy-go-lucky little boy who had no troubles in the world at all, had no secrets, had no demons. And a year later, in a classroom, a teacher had asked me to step forward to the desk and asked me to stand next to him. And I was only small, and the desk had drawers on the side of it, and it masked me from my waist down the way. And this, I use the term loosely when I say man, decided at that stage that it was okay for him to lay his hands on me. And the fear that struck in me was I just couldn't move. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know why this man was touching me the way he was touching me. I was in front of my whole peer group, and none of them apparently saw this. But this happened several times, and I used to wear shorts at school. And, it progressed where it went from being rubbing of the back of the legs to a hand inside my shorts and then inside my underwear, progressing from there onwards. Complete confusion. Didn't have a clue what was going on. I knew that what was going on wasn't right, but I didn't know what was going on. Again, the whole idea of confusion with sexuality, because I was aroused. I didn't know why I was aroused. I didn't know what that was, and I thought that was wrong. This happened for quite a while. Can I have every opportunity that this guy got to get me up in front of the class? This happened, and I knew when it was coming because I knew what my timetable was at school. I knew when it was happening. So I would have days in advance petrified. I knew it was coming. And the worst thing is, this guy socialized with my parents outside the school. So he would come to a mutual family friend's house, and they would, have cocktail parties and dinner parties. So this is somebody who my parents trusted out with school and in school. So I tried to put it to the side. I didn't understand what was going on, and I left it. And eventually, about 2 years later, a year and a half later, I progressed within the school. It was quite a big school, 300 kids or what have you. And we used to have rotas to go to baths at night. And we had a deputy headmaster who had his study in the school. He also had a bathroom and a bedroom.
there. And he was your grandfatherly type, you know. He was your soft, gentle, kind, empathetic, caring person who children trusted. And as time progressed, I was put onto the rota to be bathed. I ended up going into his study to get a bath. I think I was about 9 at the time. And he used to have his study door open into his bedroom, which had a little bath in it. And he would be marking homework, but always holding a conversation with you when you were in bathing. And that engagement became more than conversation. He would come in and he would catch you in the bath, and he would double check if you had on the premise that you were being hygienic. He said, "Now, do you understand to wash underneath your armpits? And there's a reason why. Can you show me?" I was like, "Yes, absolutely." I had no idea where this was going. I didn't think that it was wrong. I trusted this man implicitly. And he then started to ask me to stand up in the bath. And he started explaining, I don't mean to be coarse, but he started explaining about the differences in men, about how some are circumcised and how some are not, and that I'm not circumcised, and what I have to do to clean myself. And he demonstrated that on me. And I still didn't know what was going on. But as that progressed and moved on, so he progressed. So he then exposed himself to me at a later stage and explained he was different and that I had to see that difference and that, you know, how that developed. This man, from 9 until 13 and a half, he stole my childhood. He broke my body, and he made me feel that I had been complicit in this, that I had asked for this, that I had wanted this, that I had nurtured this relationship with him, that I wanted his favors. And that's the way he groomed me. He was spectacular at it. Absolutely spectacular. I was assaulted by a teacher, and my mother eventually found out that I'd been assaulted by another teacher, and she came flying into the school and spoke to this gentleman, George Hill, the deputy headmaster, who was my main perpetrator. And she explained that she wasn't paying for an education for her son to be assaulted by a teacher. And he sat my mother down and he reassured her. I begged my mother not to go to the school. I begged her, but she wouldn't listen. He sat her down and he reassured her. And as my mother now says, Ian's such a nice, popular little boy. No one would want to see Ian hurt. My mother didn't know. But that night was the night that he decided to take it to another level, and he raped me that night. And that continued for 2.5, 3 years. And unfortunately, I didn't know at the time. I thought that that's what relationships were about. But he was a masochist. He enjoyed inflicting pain on me. So it wasn't just a question of being raped or being brutalized. It was being done in a really violent and aggressive way. I can remember going back into my dormitory at night and climbing into my bunk bed and thinking that everybody would know what had happened because I was bent double I just I couldn't straighten myself up, you know. But I developed a relationship with this man, however dysfunctional that was. You know, you may have heard that he's the first person I ever said that I love you to, out with my mother and father and my sister. So love for me is quite a difficult word. You know, it's not a word I use. I equate it, unfortunately, to abuse. So the cycle went on, where I was getting passed to various teachers. I got passed to another younger teacher and was abused there. Now, by the time I was 12, I knew that what was going on with certain teachers abusing me wasn't right, but I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know where to go, and I didn't know what to say. And I remember, my parents at that time worked in the Middle East, running hotels out there. And I remember sneaking into their sort of like hotel room and opening up a bottle of scotch and taking a drink of scotch. And I don't have a clue why I did that. Not a clue at all. But that's when my drinking started. And because I was sexualized, I think, at such a young age, my peer group, when I went away from school, were always older. I was always mixing with older kids. So I mixed with somebody who was 17 and a half in Oman, and he kind of introduced me to cannabis at about 12. And he couldn't get cannabis one day, so he got heroin. So the first time I smoked heroin, I was about 12 and a half, which is just, I think about that now. I have a stepson who's 23, and it appalls me to think about that. But what it did was, I just buried my head into drugs and alcohol, and I just didn't have to think about what was going on. I didn't have to worry what I was being asked to do or expected to perform or how to behave. I could just bury myself in the bottle or bury myself in drugs. And you know, I really did bury myself in drugs, you know, and alcohol. The first time I had my stomach pumped, I think I was about 13 and a half. I say the first time, I can't even tell you how many times I've had my stomach pumped, you know. So what I had been this nice little boy who everybody wanted to be around, who had no secrets, who had no lies, who had a childhood. And by the age of 12 and a half, I had turned into this completely unrecognizable person. My parents didn't know who I was. They didn't know what was going on. I was getting sent away to some of the top psychiatrists in the country. Nobody could get to the bottom of what it was. I got sent on to another, you know, really privileged public school. I got expelled from there when I was 14 and a half, 15. I, at that stage, was completely confused sexually. So when I was 14, I was getting on trains in Reading and heading into London and hitting the gay scene, and I was offering myself to groups of men. I thought I was gay. I thought I was bisexual. I thought that's what you did. That's what I'd been taught to do, to pleasure men. You know? Put myself in a really, really risky, dangerous situations because I had no regard for myself. And from the age of 13 up until 38, I've had no regard for myself. When somebody takes your essence, breaks your body, turns you into this person who you were never destined to be. They stole my opportunity, as they, I'm sure, have stolen many people in this room's opportunity. I had parents who scooped me up, and scooped me up, and scooped me up, and scooped me up. They paid my drug debts. They paid my rent. I lost jobs. I lost my driving license 3 times through drink, driving, drugs, you know. I've exasperated everybody with my behavior, you know? Really reckless and irrational behavior. I went for a week to Hawaii on a holiday, and I ended up staying there and living there for 4 years. My mother ended up having to speak to the police about the amount of money she was sending to me in Hawaii because they thought she was laundering money. She sent me £20,000 one year to pay my crack cocaine debts. Just trying to destroy myself. Couldn't understand why. Not happy with myself. I knew what had happened was wrong. But you know, it's as simple as this. For me, the crash came when I lost everything and I ended up on the streets. And I ended up on the streets in Edinburgh for 2.5 years. And that for me was my epiphany. I had never really injected drugs before then. I had always been a drinker. I saw heroin addicts as kind of, you know, they were a different type of addict than me. I kind of, you know, the whole thing, I'm better than that because I don't do that. But I ended up sleeping rough, begging, ephemerally injecting heroin because I'd blown all my veins up my arms, my feet, my ankles. They're gone. I used to inject in my groin. And this is why it's important that projects like Southmead are funded. I know that when I sat in the streets, people saw what I was. I know what they saw. They saw a drug addict out in the streets. They had no respect for me. They saw the result. The result is really, really easy to see and walk away from. What they didn't see was the cause. And that's what Mike and his team see. And that's what they try to break. You know, they try and break that cycle of the person trying to destroy themselves, because that's what we try and do. You know? I mean, I'm spectacular at being relentless and dogged, but, you know, I'm spectacular at being a fantastic homeless person, you know? I wouldn't go inside, you know? Good God, telegraph poles were snapping with electric pylons were snapping in Scotland at the time. Support workers were begging me to come in off the streets, and I refused to, you know? If I was going to be homeless, I was going to be proper homeless. I wasn't going in a damn hostel, you know? And I was lucky. I had one person. I had one person who believed in me, you know? Truly, truly believed in me. And she kept showing up day after day at my pitch where I begged. And God, I mean, she was a pain, I'll be honest with you. Kept showing up and showing up, standing in front of me, ruining my beg, not going to get my money from my drugs. I don't need support workers. I'm completely self-sufficient out here, you know? I required nobody. And that was the big epiphany for me. You know, that person, for some reason, saw that I was of value and kept coming back and kept coming back. And eventually, I went out and I got help, and I got it squared away, and I got my drugs knocked on the head, and I got my alcohol sorted out. It's easy to get off drugs. It's easy to get off alcohol. It's easy. What's not easy is finding out why you abuse drugs and why you abuse alcohol and why you self-harm and why you think that you're of no value. That's the difficulty. That's the difficult stuff. You know, I'm very lucky that I got a second shot of my life. I'm very lucky that I had, you know, a life to step back into. You know, I had the background of an education and family and what have you. There are many people out there who don't have that. You know, their abuse has come from within their families, you know? And that's a whole different dynamic. But although we may be damaged, we can be restored. Somebody said that to me on Twitter the other day. You're damaged, but you're perfectly restored, Ian. I thought, I should speak to my wife. She might have a different opinion. But, it's important now that people understand that this has been going on for decades, generations. And we need to draw a line in the sand. It needs to stop. We need to stop throwing the same plasters on child abuse. We need to start thinking out with the box. We need to work together and put a stop to what's going on to our children up and down our country. People say to me, oh, but you work with that guy and look at him, isn't he so difficult? He's so dysfunctional. But we've tried for 14 years working with him. Why do you think that person is so chaotic and so complex? Because their woundings are really deep. Really, really deep, This is stuff that you see on the TV where they just roll it off, child sexual abuse. When the door closes behind you and you're with that adult who chooses to abuse you, believe me, it doesn't roll off the tongue quite so easily. I just want to thank Mike and his team for offering me the opportunity to come out and talk. I need you to all understand that, survivors out there need a voice. They need to be heard. They need to be believed. There's some great individuals in this room who I know are setting up other charities and support networks and work with children. All I can say to you is thank you on behalf of the kids who are out there, who need your help, So thank you very much.
I could step back, then take a look at me. Then maybe I could see where my destiny is taking me. 'Cause I don't think I can make it through another day, Lord. See, the pressure has got too much, got a pain that just won't go away. Yeah, I got a pain that just won't go away. Yeah, time doesn't heal no scars, no, no. Oh, I should learn by now that time never will. Has the sun ever set on you? Oh, I never given it a chance to set on me. 'Cause the higher I climb, and the higher I fly, just a little further back to earth me fall, yeah. So Lord, it ain't a physical pain, just torture in my brain. So if I could just turn around and get a grip of myself and lead myself to a better path than this one that I'm on. See, I don't think I'm asking much when I beg you please, to leave.